Hi, I'm Meredith Peddie, and today we're going to talk about some of the basics of good nutrition. So the first thing we think about in nutrition are the food groups. So these food groups are recommended by the Ministry of Health, and they include fruits and vegetables, whole grains or grains, our protein food group, which is nuts and seeds and legumes, fish, meat and poultry, and milk products. You'll see on the slide that there's a plate model there which shows you about the quantities that we should be consuming. If you put all the food that you ate across the day on a plate, those are about the ratios that you should be consuming. The first food group we're going to talk about are fruits and vegetables. These should make up the biggest part of your plate really at any meal. We think about eating a rainbow. Eating a variety of colours will ensure that you get a variety of different vitamins and minerals. Frozen and canned options are great options here. They tend to be a little bit cheaper, but they're still just as good as fresh vegetables and fruit at providing vitamins and minerals. Try to avoid the ones canned in syrup because syrup tends to include a lot of sugar. Instead, look for canned fruit in fruit juice or with no added sugar. We have good evidence that even incorporating one additional serving of fruit and vegetable will provide you health benefits. So my challenge to you is to think about how you could incorporate one more serving of fruits and vegetables into your diet. So what would you add? The next food group we talk about is grains. So here we encourage people to consume whole grains rather than refined grains. Whole grains are products that still have the wheat and germ added to them. So we think about brown flour, brown rice, or whole grain oats. Do be careful to follow the cooking instructions here. I had a flatmate who used to cook brown rice like it was white rice, and we ended up with crunchy rice. So whole grain products do take a little bit longer to cook. So just to reiterate what we're talking about when we talk about whole grains, you'll see on the slide that we have a whole grain that contains the bran, the endosperm, and the germ. So that makes up a whole grain. Any product that contains all of those components is considered a whole grain. So for example, Wheat Bix, which is kind of ground up, you don't see the individual grains, that still gets to be a whole grain product and is a great one. But we try and avoid the products that just contain the endosperm. So those would be white bread, white rice, and things like that. So our next food group is legumes, seeds, fish, poultry, and red meat. There is a reason why it is in that order. We are trying to encourage people to consume more plant-based proteins and less animal-based proteins. Animal-based proteins tend to come packaged with saturated fat and other nutrients which are not ideal to consume in large quantities, whereas our plant-based proteins tend to come packaged with fibre and other nutrients which are great for us. Protein, however it comes packaged, is a great nutrient to support tissue growth and repair, which might be important for people with osteoarthritis. We do encourage you to consume smaller portions of meat and try and incorporate plant-based proteins into your food. So an example here would be to make a spag bowl or a mince-based dish, but replace half the mince with legumes. So you're still getting a similar amount of protein, but some of it is coming from a plant-based and some of it is coming from an animal-based protein. Canned legumes are cheap and easy too. So for those of you that might be vegan, sometimes there's some concern that vegans are not getting enough protein, and that can be an issue, but as long as you are consuming a variety of plant-based proteins, you should be fine. So we encourage you to consume a combination of grains and legumes across your day. That should ensure that you're getting all of your essential amino acids that you need for growth and repair in terms of tissues. Just a couple of other nutrients to be aware of. Iron. So iron traditionally comes from animal products, so like red meat. You can get adequate sources from things like dark leafy greens, but it is important to think about the absorption of those products because our body does have to work a little bit harder to absorb iron from plant-based foods. So one of the things that you might like to consider is to adding vitamin C to your meals when you are consuming iron-rich foods. So you can do this by consuming tomatoes with your spinach or having an orange after your meal. Another thing that is good to consider is the kind of inverse of that, which is products that might inhibit iron absorption or stop iron absorption. So one of the common things here is tea and coffee, and if we consume tea and coffee with our meals, that can reduce iron absorption. So try and move those hot drinks to 30 minutes after your meals. B12 is another important nutrient that only comes from animal sources. So if you are a vegan, particularly long term, you should be looking at vitamin B12 supplements or making sure that you're having foods that are supplemented with B12. Our final food group is milk and milk products. These are important because they are the main source of calcium in our diets, and calcium is important for supporting strong bones. One of the things to consider here, though, is that plant milks are becoming more popular. Plant milks can be lower in calcium unless they're fortified. So make sure that you are picking fortified options, and ideally you want to be looking for plant milks that have more than 100 milligrams of calcium per 100 mils of milk. Milk products, particularly cow's milk, can come with a little bit of saturated fat in them. So we do encourage you to look for the trim milk options or the lower fat options here when you're consuming milk products. So here's an example of a nutrient information panel, just to check that you're looking at the right place for your calcium. So scroll down, find the calcium line, and look across to the 100 mils column and make sure that that is above 100 milligrams of calcium. Water is not really a nutrient, but something we like to think about, particularly when we're talking about avoiding dehydration. We encourage you to make water your first choice, avoiding drinks that might contain sugar or extra energy. Signs of dehydration include a headache, feeling tired, or feeling lightheaded. So just think about those symptoms if you have them across the day, and maybe try drinking a little bit of water. Another way to check whether you're dehydrated or not is to look at the colour of your pee. Ideally, you'd be looking for that light yellow colour that's on our slide there. If it's darker than that, you probably want to be trying to drink more. If it's lighter than that, you're probably well hydrated and don't need to worry. Do think about the timing of when you're drinking. If you're really dehydrated in the evening, it's probably not a great time to think about rehydrating, because all that's going to happen is that you're going to have to get up in the night to pee. So try and think ahead and drink water earlier in the day. Now that we've finished talking about food groups, let's talk about cooking considerations. Here, good methods include steaming, microwaving, air frying, or boiling. Try to taste the food before you add your salt. Sometimes we go on autopilot with our salt shaker, and in fact the food tastes pretty good without it. Also, try and experiment with other herbs and spices. You might find some other flavours that can replace that sodium and it tastes great. Finally, try to avoid high salt sauces like soy sauce. There are some low sodium options out there which make great replacements and don't increase your salt intake. Try to use plant-based oils when you're cooking. So these are oils that tend to be liquid at room temperature, and avoid the oils that are high in saturated fat that tend to be solid at room temperature. Plant-based oils are better for your heart than saturated fat. So one of the ways of thinking about how much of each of these food groups you need is to use your hands. So when we think about oils, we think about just a serving being just the tip of your finger. Cheese, we think about 2 fingers, or basically a slice of cheese. So meat and beans can fit on the inside of your palm. But when we think about carbohydrates, so brown rice or brown pasta, we want that to be slightly bigger, so you can kind of think about the outside of your palm being the serving there. Fruit, again, is a palm size, or just an apple. And then when we think about vegetables, we think about being 2 handfuls or as much as you like. Sometimes when we start thinking about portions, we need to be aware of something called portion distortion. So on our slide, we've got some examples here of what has happened over time. So you can see that servings have increased over time. The one I particularly like is the Coca-Cola. That little Coke is the same size as a regular coffee. Most of us, if we bought that, would feel a little bit ripped off. Portion distortion can also happen on our plates. Over time, the sizes of our dinner plates has increased. Which plate do you think has the most food on it? The answer is actually that these plates have the same amount of food on them. And you can see that the smaller plate, though, looks like it's got more food on it. And we've done studies here where if you get people to eat off a smaller plate, they actually feel just as satisfied eating the same amount of food. So maybe something you could try is just eating off a smaller plate. So how do we make good nutrition happen? The first thing to do is to try and make the healthy choice the easy choice. You can do this by chopping up vegetables beforehand and having them in your fridge as an easy snack, or just keeping your fruit bowl somewhere in sight so that you can pick fruit over other things that might be in your cupboard. Another thing to think about is support. It's really hard to eat healthy when other people in your household might not be. So try and get your whole household on board to make some healthy changes. Another thing we can think about is trying to eat more mindfully. The first thing that you could do here is to try and record everything that you eat and drink. There are heaps of apps out there that will facilitate this, but you can also just do it with a pen and paper. And the idea here is just to get you more aware of what you're putting in your mouth. Sometimes we tend to put things in our mouths without even thinking about it. And if you're asked to recall what you were eating, you might not remember that that's what you ate later in the day. Another idea here is to make your eating zones screen-free zones. Put your laptop down, put your phone down, and just enjoy your meal without those screens in front of you. We also encourage people to think about their food. So think about what it smells like, what it tastes like, where it comes from. These are all techniques that can help you appreciate your food more and help you slow down when you're eating. Try to listen to your body. A lot of us like to eat when we're sad, when we're happy, when we're bored, but ideally you want to just try and eat when you're physically hungry. You can also think about something called the last bite threshold. So this is the threshold at which you feel comfortably full, but don't feel like you've overeaten. A lot of us were brought up to eat everything on our plate, so sometimes we need to adjust how much we're putting on our plates to accommodate that. But it's a really good thing to kind of think about when you're eating and realise when you're full and to stop eating at that point. Also, remember to read the labels on your food. You've got some lovely information in your SCOTS handbook that will give you some guidance here. And finally, don't be afraid to try new things. You might find a new favourite vegetable, a favourite fruit, or an amazing whole grain. There is plenty of additional nutrition information that you can find in your SCOTS handbook. But if you want to look online, just make sure that you are looking at trusted sources of information. So places like the Ministry of Health or the New Zealand Heart Foundation have some great nutrition resources available. Otherwise, good luck with your healthy eating journey, and thanks for watching.